Hey you geeks! A few weeks ago I announced a Q&A to celebrate 500 subs. I was so excited and nervous to answer your questions, and you guys had some great questions. Then life happened, and I'm getting to them now. So without further ado, though I do apologize for ruining your names, no one can ever pronounce my last name, so I feel your pain. Ryan Ratchford asks, do you write any particular fantasy yourself? Anything you'd like to talk about? I do have 2 fantasy stories simmering in the back of my head. One I started in high school, not knowing a thing about modern epic fantasy, save Aragon. I wanted to write something like the cross between the Red Book of Westmarch and the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, while also serving as the story that provided the basis for the monomyth the world over. Little did I know I dabbled in high fantasy. I wrote a prologue and several chapters. Here are a few details that will not make the final cut. The prologue is written by the angel Gabriel, who is gender switched and goes by the name Gabby. You see, I was woke before it was cool. It's also chock full of bad exposition. The main character also goes around calling people lowlanders all the time. And we're gonna have to fix that. Sebastian Samuel asks, Patreon when? Thank you for your support. As for Patreon...
After the Civil War, veterans had to come to D.C. to get their pensions. They had to visit the office personally. They waited for a clerk to look through all the Civil War records until their papers were found. Do you know what the papers were bound with?
No.
Red tape.
I'm quite aware that President Bartlett didn't really answer the question. Honestly, I probably won't make a Patreon until this channel can be monetized on its own. Mary Treaty asks, have you read the Queen's Thief series? If not, will you? They are great. What's your most hated book series of all time? I have not read The Queen's Thief. It certainly looks like something I'd be interested in. I also have not read Jurassic Park. I can't promise I'll read any of my viewers' recommendations. Unlike other Booktube channels that will do surface reviews for 4 or 5 books a week, when I choose a book, I have to be reasonably confident that when I finish it, I'll want to do an in-depth review of it. Opportunity costs are a real consideration, though once I start a book, I will finish it. As for most hated book series of all time, His Dark Materials. I read these back when the first movie came out and it got blacklisted by the USCCB. This was back in my woke days, so naturally I picked it right up. The first 2 books weren't so bad, but the 3rd book had a character decry all Catholic sisters as evil, and that didn't sit right with me.
What the
And then I found the ending very unsatisfying. Michael Lewis asks, Question 1. Are there any rules about recommendation, length, or content, i.e. adult themes and depiction of violence? Question 2. How do you define a successful video? I ask because your compare and contrast videos of Inferno and Full Metal Alchemist I think are some of your best work, but they are not highly viewed. Thanks! About recommendations, keep in mind what I just said. As for my views on content, I started this channel reviewing Shadow of the Conqueror, and that's... Yet I still liked it. Successful videos are ones that I enjoyed making all the way through. Though I want to make all my videos, some are a real chore to finish, while others aren't. Once they go live, I kinda hate them all equally, since I'm always looking to improve. All I can see are the flaws.
I never look back, darling. It distracts from the now.
However, I think the Paradox of Athena is my most successful video currently. It goes to the heart of why my channel is unlike anyone else's, while it still rides the algorithm fairly well. The editing is super jumpy, but that's because I was really excited about the concept. As for my Full Metal Alchemist series, I like them, but think there's lots of room for improvement when it comes to using the Divine Comedy to explain anything. Lessons I hope I've learned now as I embark to use the Divine Comedy to explain the Stormlight archive. Platypus asks, What, if any, classic or perhaps overused tropes do you actually like?
From the first moment I met you, your arrogance and conceit, your selfish disdain for the feelings of others made me realize that you were the last man in the world I could ever be prevailed upon to marry.
Yes, I'm a sucker for two people who would get along great but had to get over their faulty first impressions, at least when it's done mildly well. Series like Bridgerton turn this trope into the most beautiful train wreck I have ever seen. I had to watch the Dumpster Fire season finale because this trope got me, but I skipped like 10 episodes. Naturally, I also love this trope turned up to 11 in what Red from Overly Sarcastic Productions called Crouching Moron Hidden Badass.
Well, sink me if it isn't Colonel Ramsbottom.
I will never not love Sir Percival Blakeney, Baronet. Taylor Clark asks, what's your favorite book series of all time? I can only go off series I actually finished, so that's Lord of the Rings, Mistborn Era 1, Harry Potter, Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, Twilight, and His Dark Materials. It should come as no surprise that Lord of the Rings is my favorite. I love all things Tolkien. Ironically, reading his books are my least favorite part. If Viggo Mortensen hadn't been quite so awesome as Aragorn, I doubt I would have ever finished those books. Listening to them on Audible is better, but honestly, I love Tolkien's appendices, and The Origin of Golf might be the best thing written by human hand. The Stormlight archive is on track to be a close second, but with the series incomplete, I can't judge it as a whole yet. It ain't over until the Dragon Lady sings. Eric Thompson asks, what book has impacted your worldview the most? I'm going to cheat and name two, since one was a spark and the other gasoline. The spark was Evangelium Vitae, which I revered even as a woke, agnostic teenager. The ultimate value and dignity of every human being is the foundation of my moral code.
Person's a person, no matter how small.
The gasoline was Chesterton's orthodoxy. It organized my instinctual morals, academic knowledge, wild imagination, and faltering faith into, well, orthodoxy. Dragon-slaying, brandy-snifting, skirt-wearing orthodoxy. I talk a lot more about this in my Paradox of Ravenna video. Warning, watching that may cause seizures. Brad Mays asks, you often make scholarly and historical references to many of your videos, not to mention pop culture references. Do these references usually come from knowledge you've gained in the past or research while you're reading a story? It's a bit of both. Often, as I'm reading a story, I'll come across an idea that sounds familiar and say,
Yeah, I read a book on it once.
Fortunately, many of the books I can recall reading are still in my possession, so I go and read those again, often finding things I'm not expecting but still fit. When I made The Honor of Roshar, I had read several theories on natural law and knew I wanted to make a video on it before I finished Words of Radiance. I picked up C.S. Lewis's essay on natural law because I knew his was written for a general audience, like I wanted my video to be. So I read it and find an extended allegory for natural law as music and the premise of the Way of Kings climax. I often think in pop culture references and have to filter them out in my daily speech. For my videos, I just leave them in. Sometimes I do research them, like when a quote is on the tip of my tongue and I just can't remember where it's from, or when I finish a script and realize I've used exclusively quotes from Disney princess movies or the Pirates of the Caribbean. I do try to use a variety of sources, but it's
more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
Wendell Chairgarden asks, you use clips from musicals in your videos. Have you been in a musical? What is your favorite musical? And which Stormlight character should get a musical number in a TV movie adaptation? I was on theater crew, costume crew specifically, throughout most of high school and college, and head costumer of The Insanity of Mary Gerard, which is not a musical, but oddly applicable to a lot of high fantasy. I did sneak on stage during a scene of Footloose. I am what is known as a triple threat. Can't sing, can't dance, and can't act. Favorite musical? It's pure nostalgia and just so much fun. I also got to play drum set when my high school band played the Joseph Medley. Lastly, while all Stormlight characters deserve a musical number, I think only Wit could pull it off if the adaptation itself was not already a musical. Billy Batson asks, if you had a Rashadium, what would you name it? Bree Hinny Winnie Hinny Hooey Ha, or Bree for short, named for the best war horse in all of fantasy. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you would like to see more. Your patronage is greatly appreciated.